today we're discussing the need for property technologies. Well, not necessarily the need, but we're looking at bridging the gap or jumping across a pond to another country. It would be probably the number one thing that I talk to property technology about. If they haven't already attempted to go to another country, they have their sights set on it. There are very few people who are just looking at being happy here in the Australian market. I don't know what that says about the Australian market, but we've got an esteemed panel here next to me. So I might start with a question, because we've only got 20 minutes today to solve the problems of the world. You've got the mic, Mel, so I'll go to you first. Why would a property technology company need to exit Australia, or not exit Australia, but look to another country? Why, in your opinion?
Australia's too small.
Too small? Just across the board, we're too small?
Yep.
So are you saying then that they couldn't exist happily here in Australia?
Well, a lot of the startups and scale-ups that we see, they are born global, so they might set up their company here, but in terms of looking for investments as well, if they don't have that mindset where they're going to go overseas and access a bigger market, they have not less chance of survival, but they probably have smaller chances of actually raising more capital to grow.
So for a company that would be tied to Australia, well, not necessarily tied, but very hard to move, like a conveyancing company, for example, where our conveyancing is very specific, do you think they should be looking to jump across to another pond as well, or?
Well, it depends on the market. I mean, conveyancing exists in other countries as well.
Absolutely.
If they are solving a specific problem here that can be solved elsewhere, then absolutely. But if they're solving a problem that's only unique to Australia, then potentially not. But I mean, hopefully when they've actually decided to create that product, they've worked out the problem that they need to solve. And if it's only Australia, then their business model is set around Australia. But Australia is a small place. Yep. So a lot of the companies that we see, they are born global.
Sure. Paula, may I ask you, why do companies need to go across to why do we need to look to other countries?
It's hard to say for each company why they would go into a market or why they would choose a specific market. I think that comes with where they sit strategically at a point of time, and if they have the runway to do it, if they had investors from a specific country that might drive them to go into that country. But there is a whole process of market readiness and how to fit into that market. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done prior to going global, and then actually committing to that market as well once they do. So it can be opportunistic for some companies, but for others, if you know the market that they're going into is very different to what they're doing in Australia, then there is a lot of work and dedication, and having a team that will actually be able to look after that expansion specifically. Absolutely.
Stuart, may I get your take on what you see as being one of the things, or one of the ways Ashurst looks to assist when companies are going to, they're looking to other countries?
Yeah, look, when companies come to corporate lawyers for advice on those kind of things, it's usually driven by sort of a small number of factors. So they're going across for the product or the scale of market. But when they come to us, a lot of the time it's because either they're being pulled across there, so they've got a product, they might be focused on Australia, they might be focused on Asia Pac or a region, and then all of a sudden they might be getting these inbound inquiries from the US or Europe, and that's a terrific sign. So if your customers are telling you, hey, we need you over here, and then they'll often send a delegation of people to go and sort of hopefully drum up some sales, and they go across, so that's number one. Or number two is they're looking for a more strategic entry point into the market, and they might go across and look for either some partners or someone with capital, or ideally someone with both, like a strategic, that can provide them some capital into the market and an entry place into the market with some ideas and connections and people like that. So in both of those circumstances, it's sort of what we generally look to do is get the structure right. So a lot of funders, particularly in the US, maybe less so in Europe and the UK, will say, if you want to do a big Series C to fund your expansion into the US, we need you to completely re-domicile the top company across here, because we don't want to learn about every different jurisdiction and how your laws work. So we'll help them flip up their company, which you may have heard, to domicile over there. Or the alternative way is we'll set up a branch office or a subsidiary there, and depending on the nature of the country, we'll help them establish there, and then getting the tax structuring right, the dividend repatriation, the funding, the employment agreements. They're the kind of things that they're admittedly less exciting than going across and attacking a new market and doing with that sort of product build out and that team build out. But measuring twice and cutting once with some of that stuff really does help get the fundamentals right. And then depending on the scale, you can do a lot of cool things with playing around for global expansion with where your head company is, where the IP lies, and those kind of things. And we're well placed to help with that because it's an exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting corporate structure before you go to another country is something I would strongly advise from a company that did it really badly the first time. Marianne, what pitfalls do you see in jumping to another country? What have you noticed?
One of the things that we see with a lot of our companies is they sometimes get the two stages confuse, exploration and expansion. And exploration is basically where you are looking around, doing your research. You might go on a mission, you might actually speak to a few people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're then ready to go and do something. It's and a lot of companies, they might just go on a mission and go, right, I've learned everything, so I'm going to go and expand now. So the classic example would be, I went to a mission last year, I met a few people, so I'm going to go and hire my first salesperson in the UK or the US. I mean, in the US, for example, people who have expanded in the US, they need to basically be there for a year before people will take them seriously. So if you haven't factored the stages of expansion at the exploration stage and you go straight from exploration to expansion, that's actually going to be quite dangerous. So there's some of the things that I see people just jumping in without that homework, including the piece of work that they need to do with you, Stuart, for example.
And the length of exploration time, is that specific to the company, would you say?
Absolutely. And the opportunity at hand and the product and the country.
Okay, all good. May I throw it to Paula for a second? Paula, you run trade missions. They're obviously there to connect people at the outset, right?
Yeah, so that's just part of the process.
Yep.
But then when supporting the countries that are, the companies that are going global, it does resonate a lot with what Marianne is saying, because the commitment to that market is very important. When we look at the companies that succeed versus the ones that don't, it will be, they really have planned for it. They know exactly where they sit, in the competition landscape. They have the runway to do it, and they're committed as in not just hiring someone locally, like really being in market, especially if it's the US, because it's such a complex market to enter. So there is a lot to explore, to commit, and really being in market to be able to succeed. So
as Austrade, do you strategically introduce them? Talk us through what a trade mission would look like that you would typically go on. Is it for strategic introductions? Are you just giving them a flavour of this is what it's like, and here are a bunch of people that we know may be able to assist you in that? Yeah,
so the trade missions are actually coordinated from offshore.
Right.
So if the trade commissioners, for example, they see an opportunity specifically in a sector, then the way they will support the companies is by inviting them to come to a specific event, for example. So having the space so the company wouldn't have to invest money in being there. They would need to travel there and they will have their expenses, but I guess it's just allowing the companies to be present and then coordinating with introductions that they can facilitate from market. So for the trade technicians being in there. But apart from that, we have 5 locations where we have landing pads, which is programs that are run not by us, by a third party, where you can receive a lot of information about how to land in that country. And my team specifically, we run one-on-one relationships with the companies onshore, and just really connecting them to people that would assist them in going global. If it's partners, if they're looking for partners, and so helping them with a little bit of the research if that's necessary, and as well as connecting them to key people. We spend a lot of time apart from the introductions, like doing the first demo to a lot of companies, and then we just let the companies just lead the relationship after that. So just really using the Austrade network to really try and find who are the key people in that market that you would like to speak to, and if there's someone from us that will have that connection, so we can do a warm introduction instead of a cold outreach.
Fantastic. All three of you have talked about funding in some way, shape or form, so I'll open this question up to anyone who wants to answer. What kind of funding does one need to jump to, let's say, America, in your opinion? Is there a ballpark figure? Does it depend on the company? What do you have to have sitting in your bank account to do it? Anybody?
Yeah,
Bueller?
I'll dodge the question to the extent it goes to exactly what the number is, because it's so specific about how you're going to attack the market. But I think two things that Paula said in her two responses really resonated with the experience that I've seen with my clients going overseas. The first one Paula said is the timing of when you go across is really important. And we just heard Ash talk about sort of that tremendous pressure founders feel to hit those growth targets. There's a number of private capital investors who'll only want to speak to a company if you're globally scalable, and you may not be. It might just be that you want to attack a sector of the market, a region first. So sort of timing where to go is key. And then the other thing he said was funding. And in terms of the pitfalls and how much to do that, some challenges we've seen with some of our clients is they'll go across to a rather large market, say like the US or maybe even Europe, where they'll say, well, we'll move into Europe, and they might try to attack 3 European countries at once with different regulation, whether it's being property or other forms of licensing, and it can be really, really, really tough to get a foothold in that market. I mean, you could be a mature stage, profitable 50-year-old successful Australian company, and it's hard to move into the US, and it's very hard to move into Europe or another region. But if you're also a startup and you're not yet profitable and you're reliant on raising funds to prove that you're globally scalable, I know last year I worked with 3 companies that went across to Europe because they felt immense pressure to justify their next valuation to prove that they were globally scalable, and to prove they were globally scalable, they went for a foothold in 3 different regions, and that approach requires a lot of money, and investors will say, that's great, go for gold. If you get 10x or 15x, that's excellent, and if you fail, not so bad for me because I've got a portfolio. But when you're a founder, you're dedicating 100 hours a week to this thing, so it's not a portfolio approach to you. So I think that timing of the entry, the focus of the entry, rather than trying to do too much or too many regions, I see is good. And if at all possible, if you're being pulled across there because of inbound inquiries, that's a really good sign that there's some demand for your product and that you're following the lead and following the money. So I can't give you it's 10 million, it's 1 million, it's 50 million, but they're some of the things that I've noticed that have worked well and have been more challenging for other clients. Yeah,
do either 3 of you have a say on whether you should hire in the country that you're going to, or do it like I did, which was travelling from Australia? Do either of you have a say in that? I've got a pretty defined opinion.
I think at the end of the day, it really is up to the strategy that the founder is going to have. What I can speak to is what when we're observing, which if a company goes right in, we go, VP of sales and, starts from the top down, versus the bottom up with the founder in market. So hiring from the bottom up with the founder in market, as we see it, just looking in, it becomes a lot easier to succeed, less risky, but it really depends on the strategy that the company does, and we can't really give them that advice. It really is a matter of the way that they find. And so one of the key things is actually connecting with other founders that have done it and really learning from the people that did it.
Yeah, great advice. Mel, what would be the one tidbit that you want to give to the people here who might be considering jumping to another pond? What would be your advice to them?
You need to do your research.
Do your research, yeah.
And just make sure
on Google or
well there are organisations that help people. So you might say, for example, you might go on a mission, and no disrespect to missions, they're really, really important, but what I was trying to say is you do a mission, you basically go and sniff around, meet a few people. That doesn't mean that you're ready to go into expansion stage. There's a bit in the middle. You need to do your planning. You need to get advisors involved. And I've seen a lot of, we've got relationships with a lot of advisors who, for example, might charge $25,000 to $30,000 to do an in-market research piece for you. So they look at your product, they look at the competitors in the market, they might even do some market research interviewing clients. A lot of founders might think, oh, 25, 50 grand, I don't want to spend that kind of money, I'll just hire someone on the ground. And that's where it's really dangerous, because you're going to spend more than 50 grand if you put someone on the ground.
Yep. Okay. I hear that loud and clear. Do your research, Stuart. Do you have one piece of advice, or have you given us that strong advice to already seek legal assistance first in the setup?
Oh no, I mean, you don't need to spend money on lawyers just to go and explore a market. I'm not saying that. If you want to set up there,
can I record that?
Yeah. No, I mean, spend the money on staff and customer acquisition, all those other good things. Look, one way that we help, particularly in the UK and throughout Europe, is we help sort of the missions that go across, and other people run those things. But don't be afraid to ask. If you do have an advisory network, a founder network, particularly with other companies with boots on ground, don't be afraid. I think you'd be surprised at how much people are willing to help and steer you in the right direction and introduce you to people. Two founders that I worked with a lot founded Judo Bank, so not a Proptech, but another one, and they were setting up a challenger bank in Australia, and they went across to try to raise funds in the UK, which was very hard. But they went and met with Shawbrook and Aldermore and the founders of those businesses and said, like, how did you do it? How is it over here? They weren't coming in to say, we're here to cut your grass. How can we chip into your market? But if people come to us for advice, we know a lot of people within that network and are very, very happy to introduce them. So don't be afraid to ask for introductions, ask for help for people who are deeply entrenched in that market. And someone might say, oh, that's great, there's another company that does exactly this, but they don't do that part of it. So you might not attack the entire market at first. So boots on ground, and don't be afraid to ask for help for people who are in market rather than trying to look in yourself, which can be a little bit harder to get those deep insights. Yeah,
fantastic advice. Paula, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give to somebody looking to jump to another country?
I think it really is do your research and also really understand what the competitive landscape is like. I think a lot of people are always pitching in the sense that they're talking about how disruptive their product is, but doesn't really they may not really provide that specific, detailed, in the matrix, where exactly do you sit in relation to the other companies that are in market or even globally. So I think understanding the competitive landscape is definitely key before you put your foot in.
On that, I know there's no silver bullet to understanding the competitive landscape, but is there anything that a PropTech can do that would assist them? Like, yes, you can go on a trade mission, you can speak to people over there. Is it a combination of all in understanding the competitive landscape?
I think it's really connecting to the people in market, so the PropTech associations and really the ecosystem to really understand what's happening there. Mm-hmm. So that's why boots on the ground is so important. But I have a question for you.
For me? Oh, no. Don't be careful.
What's
this being recorded?
What's the role of the accelerator programs in actually taking a...
Yeah, look, I get that a lot. I think most of our applicants for this year's cohort are actually after expertise, not necessarily here based in Australia, but actually going to another pond. And because that was something we did very successfully with Box Brownie, they are asking questions on how do we do that. So accelerator programs do a number of things. Stone and Chalk are a fantastic one as well. But we try and dismantle the business in whatever capacity they need. So some people that come to us can't even communicate their product to us. And I've been in the industry since I was 19. So if you can't tell me what it is you're doing, then it's unlikely you can tell a consumer. So they need assistance in communicating their product. And we connect them with specialists like Warren Tate, who teach them how to do that. Then some people can't recruit, and we've got Capstone here today. Recruitment is a huge problem with property technology companies. And then some people, need assistance in dismantling their product. Maybe their product is not quite right. Box Brownie is a great example of that. We started out doing vanity edits, boob jobs, tummy tucks, thigh gaps. That's obviously not what we're doing now, but we had to reinvent that product before we took it to market to match the space that it would fit. So there could be a whole heap of things. My wife is an expert in looking at a business and systematically dismantling the inefficient processes and either outsourcing those or getting tech to be written for those. So there are so many ways that a property technology company can need assistance, and they're all a myriad of different ones. And when they come in, sometimes the problem that they have right now is not the problem that you end up with down the track, and they'll go through these phases just like any property technology company does. Ash was saying, I could hear the various stages that he'd gone through. So you would hope an accelerator would be able to identify where they are, give them the advice, or put them in front of the specialists that were able to move them forward faster. And of course, there are strategic introductions and partnerships and things that we do with the peak bodies here in Australia. But a long-winded answer to a lot of things. I think we're out of time. Is that correct? Are you going to spill water on me again? Can you please give a massive round of applause to our wonderful panel here?
Thank you.